Well, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the surface that I use and what I do to get that ready for a pastel painting. So here on my masonite board, which I've painted black, um, people ask me where I get these, and I've had this masonite board for a long time. So I paint on both sides, and I've got a larger one, and this is one that I painted black. Um, so I have a piece of Rives BFK printmaking paper on this board that I have taped just with masking tape. And actually I like masking tape because I can see through it and then I can see this border. I don't measure it or mark it with the pencil. I just put it on there. So, um, and I should have looked up here. I can see where it says Rives, and I actually, this is just a test piece, but I like to not use that part of the paper, so I usually crop that off. So I didn't look at that this time around. So this is just a practice to show you how I get this ready. But it is a sheet of 175 weight paper, which is a little lighter than I like, but a lot of practice pieces and demonstrations for pastel societies I do on that weight of paper. And when I do a finished pastel in my studio, then I use either 250 or 280, which is a heavier weight paper. But I like the lighter weight paper, especially for studies and demonstrations because it dries more quickly. So anyway, so I've got it taped up. The next thing that I do before I start a pastel painting is I decide what the color scheme is going to be, and then I choose the underpainting based on the color scheme. Usually for me, the underpainting is going to be the same color as the painting. Now, some people choose a complementary color, say if they are going to do, say, a landscape painting that has a lot of green, they may choose some red, orange, or even hot pink for that underpainting. For me, I'm usually choosing the color of an underpainting based on the color I want the painting to be. So, and I usually use golden fluid acrylics. In this case, I have picked out some really bright orange because I thought it would stand out much better for this video. That's the reason. And, or I will choose, let me grab this. Here is a color of ink that I really like, and I just got this antelope brown. I really love that color of brown. So I'll use an ink, other kinds of inks, but usually I will use a fluid acrylic, which you can also use on sanded paper. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick a wide brush. I'm going to put some of that fluid acrylic on a plate. So I put a little bit of the fluid acrylic on the plate. And the other thing that I really think about doing before I put this paint on is I use a wide brush. Here's a wide nylon brush. It's a really smooth brush. And I like to use a wide brush because basically I'm putting on a non-objective underpainting. And it's very quick, and I don't even think about what it is I'm doing, except I may, let me just put one on and then I'll talk about that. That might even be just enough. So I am going to just leave that. I might put a little extra like water, have some lighter areas. But that's probably enough for this purpose. What I'm looking for is I want to divide the paper up randomly. It's a random underpainting without thinking, oh, here's where a flower's going to go, or here's where a landscape element is going to go. I don't think about that. I think about dividing the paper up and having this color broken up on the surface. We've got a darker area here, kind of a medium area here where there was a lighter layer of paint, and then a white open area. So when I draw whatever it is going to be on top of this, I use that underpainting as a help in helping me to abstract the subject, no matter what it is, or a non-objective painting. So that's simple. I'm going to dry that with my hair dryer next because the paper buckles, but the lighter the paper is, the faster it will also dry. So the next thing I'm going to do is dry that with my hair dryer, and then I'll proceed on to the next stage. Okay. All right, so I've dried my paper now with my hair dryer, so it's pretty flat and it didn't take long to dry. Now I could put anything on here that I want. Like I said, I could put flower drawings on here. I could put a face on here. I could put a still life, a landscape, anything that I would want, I could put on that. So I need to think about what is that going to be. Well, let's say, let me decide whether to just make this into an abstract or something a little bit more realistic. But you know, I think I'm just going to go with abstract, but maybe it might have somewhat of a landscape. I don't do landscapes, but I thought, okay, so here's a couple of sketches I did for, I think, my Patreon site, just trying to use 2 lines as something simple for a landscape. So let me just do that along with having something a little bit more non-objective. So let me draw. This is a piece of General's compressed charcoal. So let me just draw in kind of a line this way. And how about another line, maybe this way? So I've got these kind of landscapey lines, which probably look more like Iowa than anything else. And then let me just put in some other lines that might go I don't know how this will turn out, but you know, and I could also make some lines with, I'm going to grab a couple more things. I've used that compressed charcoal, but here is a hard piece of hard pastel, which I could put in here. A little more mark making. It's not very dark. I think I need a darker one. So let me see what I can find here. Here is a little bit darker. Okay. And okay, so I draw on that underpainting. Basically is what I'm trying to show you, is I draw on it. And then I'm going to apply some clear gesso on top of that. I'm still looking around for a little bit darker piece of orange. That's a little bit better because that underpainting was so intense. But it's See, it's the underpainting stage that gives me that experimental aspect, and it helps loosen things up from the very beginning. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some Liquitex clear gesso on top of that. So let me get that ready. Okay, so, you know, I haven't done a lot of drawing on there, but just enough to really show you what it is that I always do. Now I have this Liquitex clear gesso. I really like it a lot. It's easy to use. I don't have to dilute it. All I do is squirt some of it on a plate. And I always have to be sure that I'm not picking up the wrong bottle, because I have matte medium here also. And it's the same bottle, but one's got a blue label and one has a green label. So to be sure I'm using the right one. And then I buy these cheap $1 brushes, bristle brushes at the hardware store. And that is what I use to put on this clear gesso, because I put it on in a random way. And I don't worry about the charcoal underneath smearing, because it really doesn't smear that much, especially if I'm using the General's charcoal. So, and I just randomly put this on, going different directions, just making sure I've got plenty of it on, because this is the first layer of how I do things. And a lot of times I spend more time on this first layer than I do anything, because if I get this correct, and this one I can see if I was doing this, you know, again, I would make this much darker, which I can make it darker once it dries. So now I'm going to dry this with my hair dryer, and then I'll feel it to make sure I've got enough clear gesso on there. And the reason I use the bristle brush is because I want a rough texture. I don't want a smooth brush. I like to see those brush strokes, because the brush strokes actually add to the surface appeal of the finished painting. So I'm going to dry that with my hair dryer.